Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to add some finishing details to our controller. So the first thing I want to do is go back and open up our front body or our top body. And in this case, I'm going to add a few more buttons, actually up here, a start and select button. And I'm doing that in this file instead of the main body because I feel like it's more of a feature within a feature. So um, having less bodies in your main body is actually better than having lots of little ones that you could work on individually and have a very short tree. So in this case, I'm going to do it in this top body uh, file. So I'm going to go into the top view, and there's a couple ways to do this, but I'm going to do it the easiest way I know how, which is to just simply create a split line. And we're going to use an ellipse to do this. So I'm making sure that this is nice and centered over the origin. We can throw some dimensions on here. So we can make this, let's make this 0.3 inches. In this direction, do 0.7. And just to help make sure everything is lined up. And one more dimension here. Let's make this 0.2. So the next step would be to actually create the split line. So we can do that by clicking this button here, the split line feature. Our current sketch is selected. Now let's choose the face. In this case, it's two faces. And there we have it. So I'm creating a split line because in order to get the shape that I want, I actually want to do some surfacing and I want to use this edge as a guide. So let's start by deleting these faces. And by doing that, we're actually going to be creating an entire surface body. So now this isn't seen as a surface. You can see over here, there's only one surface body now. And I'm going to make some construction lines in order to get this little indent shape that I want. So because we started on the right plane originally, everything is centered, I can open up a sketch on the right plane to get our shape. I'm just going to use a 3-point arc here. Just join those points together. You can see they turn black. Looks about right. You can hit the check. So you can see we have a nice curve here to determine the shape of what we're going to get inside here. And we have a boundary edge to work within. So we could do this a couple of different ways. We could choose a boundary surface. We could loft this. In this case, I want to see if the fill surface actually works a lot better. So you start with a patch boundary. Choose these two edges. You're going to see it's going to try to generate a surface here. And the constraint curve will be the one we drew earlier. You can see the zebra curves look pretty nice. Let's hit the check. And there we have a nice little indent, very smooth, no pinches or ripples or anything. And in order to get this back to a solid, we're actually going to highlight this entire thing with the knit feature and choose try to form solid, merge entities, hit the check. So now we're back to a solid. And the last thing I want to do is actually create the buttons in here. So we're going to choose a revolved ellipse. So we can do that by choosing the ellipse tool, and we're going to sketch on the right plane. Actually, let's sketch on a different plane. In order to get this ellipse to be revolved this way, we're going to need a plane to go from this point to this point. So let's insert a reference geometry plane. And if it's not letting us select the edges, we can show the sketch. Let's click out of here really quick. So there's our sketch. Show it. I'm going to insert a plane on this point and this point. And we're going to use one of these planes as a way to give us our reference plane. You can see I'm using the top plane as a perpendicular reference. So now that I have my plane, I can actually draw my ellipse. And you can see when you draw an ellipse, you start from the center out. So I'm going to pierce these points onto these edges and make sure that these are vertical. And in fact, let's unpierce them just a little bit and move them inwards. And we'll draw some horizontal lines. This way we get buttons that aren't right up to the edge, but they'll have a space in between. So let's pierce these points. Again, they should snap right on the edge. Make sure it's centered. We're going to click both of them while holding Shift, choose equal. And we'll run one more horizontal line across here and split this entire face or this entire sketch to create our revolve. So let's trim the entity here and here. Choose the revolve feature. You can see where our buttons are. Make sure unmerge is checked and hit the check. Now the buttons look like they're sticking up a little too high. So we can go back. We can unpierce these. And we can move this entire thing down. You can see as I move the sketch, it adjusts, but it doesn't lose the center. So that looks about right. So one thing about SOLIDWORKS is you can edit as you go. And even if you don't have dimensions on here, you can still get something that looks about right. You can always add dimensions later. So that looks good. So let's hide this plane for now. We can hide this sketch. We can hide this sketch. And let's use the right plane to split these into two buttons. Cut the part. Make sure consume cut bodies is unchecked. Otherwise it will eat the parts essentially. And that's it. Now we have two buttons. We can throw some fillets on here quickly. Make sure that they're small. 0.01 used to work pretty well. And do the same thing over here. And that's it. So now from this part, we can actually just highlight these as different colors. I'm going to use plastic in this case. Let's make them beige. So that way in KeyShot, we can actually see that these are going to be a different material. So let's add some fillets here. Let's do 0.02 for these edges here. And we can do a larger fillet for this area here. Make sure that the fillets don't touch each other in this area. The geometry could get a little weird up here, so I'm going to make sure that the fillet parameters are going to be a little bit less. So that looks pretty good. Remember, there's draft on here, so I'm not really worried about this back area here. So now what we can do is we can attempt to shell this. And if you're unsure about whether something can shell or not, just really look at the geometry. If you see any really thin areas or sharp areas or pointy areas, you know there might be an issue with shelling. So let's see if this is going to work. Normally I like to shell to between 0.08 and 0.1. Let's do 0.09 in this case. And let's select all the faces we'd like to shell. So that's the inside. Here. Make sure we don't miss any. That looks pretty good. Let's see if this shells. And you can see the preview works out just fine. Let's hit the check. Now, if you get this error, which I do quite often, it's going to let you shell anyway, but there's some areas that it doesn't like, and it's trying to offset the faces, in which case, even if it does work, what I would suggest you do is go back and add these fillets, the small fillets, before we shell. So what I can do is just delete these for now, and then add them later, since it's pretty simple, just like that. Even though the shell still hasn't failed, you can see we don't have any issues up in this area here. So in the next lesson, we're going to be adding some more details to the bottom half of the controller.